I mentioned in the introduction of my last video how the draft can feel more like taking random shots in the dark rather than an ordered selection of talents. And I think that this draft, especially in the first couple of selections, really exemplified that mantra. With a line of picks that threw off every single mock draft made for this year, there were some teams that ended up with a couple of picks with tremendous value, and a couple of other teams that had me shaking my head a little bit. These teams with such tremendous value are the initial winners of the draft, while the losers are just teams that may have not exited with a lot of value or have huge question marks as to the long-term outlook of their draft, according to my opinions. Of course, if I actually knew the real winners and losers of this draft, I'd be working in an MLB front office. So take these winners and losers rankings for what they are, an initial interpretation of strong and weak draft hauls. A half decade or more later, I am certainly confident that things will be different from what they are now. For example, 4 years ago in my 2021 version of this video, the Padres were one of the losers because I questioned Jackson Merrill's defensive abilities at shortstop and long-term home at shortstop with Fernando Tatis Jr. there. However, now Jackson Merrill is one of the bright young stars in center field, with Tatis a defensive anchor in right. This just goes to show that circumstances can change, and any initial draft questions or concerns can be alleviated with time. Also, one more thing, in this video, although I do take into account signing bonus pool money, I also assume all picks do get signed at the end, as most top round picks do, although that is not always the case. So, with that disclaimer and explanation, let's get on to the winners and losers. But, before we get onto this video, could you guys please hit the like and subscribe button? Currently, only 3% of people who watch my videos are subscribed, so if y'all do, not only would it help me grow my channel, but also would encourage me to create more videos like this one for you guys. And without further ado, let's get on to the video. The Baltimore Orioles entered this draft with 4 of the top 50 and 7 of the top 100 selections, so many draft evaluators knew that they were going to get a ton of value going into the draft. However, while watching the draft, I was just astonished at the quality of players that they were able to get with their picks. If they are able to sign all of these selections, which will be incredibly important, then this may be one of their better hauls in what has been an excellent decade plus of drafting for the O's. They started out this draft by selecting Ike Irish with the 19th selection, a small value personally as I had him as a top 15 player. However, what I really like about this pick specifically is that they announced him as a catcher. I noted in my mock draft that if he gets a chance long-term at catcher to stick it, then his upside is through the roof. Irish was already one of the best hitting players in all of college with some great power numbers, and should his bat translate and the defense at catcher becomes just passable, then his offensive upside could make him a premium at the catcher position for a very long time. However, while this pick alone would have put them in contention as winners of the draft, their full body of picks is what has me super excited for this class. They would select Coastal Carolina's anchor in Caden Bodine with their 2nd selection. Also a catcher, he just provides so much more insurance for the position long term. He was great defensively, and with a great season offensively, he draws some overall comparisons to JT Realmuto. However, this draft just kept on giving for the O's. They would select power-hitting shortstop Vahiva Alloy with their very next selection, the 2025 Golden Spikes Award winner, and we talked on this channel how Golden Spikes Award winners almost always do reach the major leagues, and many showcase star potential very early on in their careers. So this was a slam dunk of a selection. Next up, they would select outfielder Slater DeBrun, also in this compensation round. While undersized, DeBrun's speed and bat-to-ball skills play well beyond his size, and I was very high on him in my evaluations, labeling him as a top 20 pick. They would round out this day with 2 big, high-upside pitchers in Joseph Durwa and JT Quinn, along with Vanderbilt's RJ Austin. Top down, this might be the greatest collection of talent from one team in one draft day that I've seen in any of these draft winners and losers videos. And for a team in a transition period with many of their top prospects either graduating or struggling, this draft class injected a much-needed boost for this system. The Mariners were one of the biggest benefactors from the surprises made at the beginning of the draft, as they were able to select what was the number 1 player on many people's draft boards in Cade Anderson out of LSU. A 6'2" southpaw, Anderson was one of the best players in college baseball at striking out batters, with 180 strikeouts in just 119 innings pitched. Now in the Mariners pitching lab, the sky is the limit for Anderson as one of the elite strikeout artists in today's game. And with their 2nd selection, 35th overall, they went with catcher Luke Stevenson. I also like this selection in that long term, he can provide a change of pace for Cal Raleigh as a defensive anchor at catcher with some emerging power. And as Cal ages out of the catcher position to either first base or DH, Stevenson will have hopefully developed into a force of his own behind the plate, providing a seamless transition for Seattle. To round out their last picks of the day, they would stick to what they do best, drafting a toolsy high school player and 6'4" shortstop Nick Becker in the 2nd round, as well as Miami's Griffin Hughes in the 3rd. A very solid crop of players to anchor around a potential superstar on the mound in Anderson drafted 3rd overall. And although the Athletics only had 2 picks on the first day, losing their 3rd rounder after signing Luis Severino in the offseason, I really thought that they made the most with their 2 selections, and their overall value beat out even some teams with more selections than them. With their first pick, they selected Jamie Arnold with the 11th overall selection. Among the elite collegiate pitchers, Arnold fits squarely within that tier, and in my mock draft, I had Arnold as the first pitcher going off the board, so for him to be the 5th pitcher off the board at 11th overall is huge value for the A's. Additionally, with their 2nd round pick, they would go on to select Indiana outfielder Devin Taylor. I really liked Taylor going into the pre-draft process, and about this time a year ago, it was not out of the question for someone to say that he was in the running for the number 1 overall pick if the draft was back then. However, an underwhelming junior season would push Taylor's stock down a little bit, although he is still considered a first-round selection. So for him to go in the 2nd round to the A's is great value, and as a future middle-of-the-order offensive cornerstone, he'll fit in perfectly to whatever future ballpark the A's move into. 2 very solid selections for the A's. Along with the Mariners, I think that the Rockies were one of the teams to benefit from the surprises at the top. Ethan Holliday going to the Rockies at 4 would have been a perfect fit if it all panned out. And panned out it did. And now the Rockies got the hitter with the highest overall upside in this entire draft. Holliday was needed for this rebuild as a prospect with some elite talents to put a franchise's hopes on. Already with some of the best exit velocities in his class, Holliday long-term will have 30-plus homer upside at Coors Field as a potential cornerstone on the left side of the infield for a very long time. It may take some time for that to occur as a high school bat, but the Rockies are in no position to need his services for a postseason push anytime soon, so this ends up fitting for their rebuild perfectly. And with their 2nd round pick, they would select J.B. Middleton, a solid, albeit potentially ceiling cap potential future middle-of-the-rotation starter. And with their 2nd round compensation pick, they would go on to select Max Bellew out of Texas. A preseason darling, Bellew, like Taylor, fell a little bit in terms of his draft stock, but still had overall first-round grades on him. So for the Rockies to grab him in the 2nd round like that is great value. And to finish up their first day haul, Ethan Hedges provides immediate major league potential and may be one of the first 3rd round picks of this draft to make the major leagues. Already with an advanced approach at USC, Hedges also has emerging power and can stick it at 3rd base. Drafts like this year and last year's are what ultimately will pull the Rockies out of this rebuild in the long run. The Guardians, despite having a much lower first-round pick than last year, end up on this winners list once again thanks to a great first-round selection in my opinion, coupled with solid drafting all around. Jace Lavalette had the potential to go number 1 overall going into the draft, but a dip in his power numbers and a rise in his strikeouts junior season led to his fall. Still, grabbing him 27th overall is still great value in my books. As a 6'6" outfielder, he provides tremendous power upside long-term, and if the strikeouts are managed, he can become a very complete hitter. It's not out of the question for Lavalette to have a Nick Kurtz/Jack Caglione type rise if all things work out. He has that level upside and developed tools. And with their next couple of selections, the Guardians would continue to draft players with standout tools, who, if they develop one or more other ones, can become very solid overall major leaguers. Tennessee's Dean Curley is a rock-solid defender, and if the bat can become major league caliber, he's a starting shortstop. Arizona's 6'3" outfielder Aaron Walton has great athleticism and emerging power, and if the long-term contact abilities can emerge, he's a force to be reckoned with. Will Hines has one of the best high-spin fastballs in his class, and Nolan Schubert is a 6'5" power-hitting lefty with a profile similar to Lavalette. I know that with the draft, you could always say that for every team, if they have one or more tools developed for every prospect, they can become really solid players. But the Guardians specifically love to draft players with a standout tool already to focus on developing other ones, and this high upside is why I love their draft specifically. And to finish up with this winners list, I have the Marlins, who flipped the script from last year's losers list into this year's winners list. While evaluating Ava Arquette, I really liked his profile as a larger-bodied infielder still with developing power and a good feel at shortstop. I thought that he was the 2nd best hitter in the class, and if he was just showcased a little bit more power upside this season, he could have had a similar upsurge to what Travis Bazzana had that got him taken number 1 overall. Nonetheless, now the Marlins jump at the opportunity to draft a really nice combination of floor and ceiling talent in Arquette, as he's already one of the best collegiate hitters in baseball, which provides his floor, and his frame and his power potential provides his long-term upside. In the draft, you're hunting for elite talents to separate yourself from other teams, and Arquette provides one of the best shots at doing so for the Marlins, a home run of a selection. What would end up following the selection was a quality run on collegiate bats. While one may call for balance for the long-term construction of the team, the Marlins got good value on the board for what they had, and a current organizational strength and long-term pitching in their minor league system, the fit is also there as well. Cam Cannarella was Clemson's top bat, and although the power numbers took a dip this year, he still possesses elite bat-to-ball skills. Similarly, Brendan Compton was Arizona State's best bat, and although there's consistency issues in his contact, he's got plus power and sneaky athleticism. Lastly, third rounder Max Williams showcased a similar set of tools to Compton at Florida State, rounding out a quartet of college bats that provide a baked-in floor combined with room to grow in one or more of their tools to provide immense upside. And now for the honorable mentions, these are the teams in which I really liked one or more of their selections, but in terms of their overall draft haul on day one, I thought they were just a tier below the other teams in terms of the quality of their selections, although for some, it is really close. I really liked the Red Sox's draft, especially getting Witherspoon at pick 15. Among all the collegiate pitchers in that area, including some top selections in Cade Anderson, I am the most confident in Witherspoon turning out into a long-time starter. Additionally, I also like the White Sox grabbing Billy Carlson 10th overall, and the Padres grabbing Cruz Schoolcraft 25th overall. Additionally, the Rays got a nice haul getting Daniel Pierce in the first round and Brendan Summerhill with their compensation round pick, and I thought that the Royals' first two picks of Sean Gamble and Josh Hammond were also nice. And now moving on to the losers, I promise I don't dislike the Angels as an organization specifically, but I just don't really like their organizational drafting strategy, which is why they very often end up as losers on this list. Big picture, the Angels' drafting strategy promotes mediocrity in my opinion, always drafting players with the highest floor but maybe not the highest ceiling. And in this draft, with the golden opportunity to change course with a premium pick, they stubbornly continued their trend. I actually like Tyler Bremner more than consensus. I thought that he showcased enough throughout his entire career at UCLA to be a good pitcher long term. However, even I can agree that him going number 2 overall is a little bit rich, especially considering the quality pitchers who demonstrated better strikeout stuff this season all around the board like Anderson, Doyle, and Arnold. For this pick to have been justified, the Angels had to have gotten some great value for them around their middle round picks. And honestly, while good, they haven't been that great. Chase Shores intrigues me as a 6'8" pitcher coming out of LSU with a fastball that can touch triple digits. But as a projected third rounder, there wasn't a ton of value drafting him at the top of the second round. Additionally, Johnny Slowinski and Nate Steed don't really move the needle for me in this draft either. And in terms of raw haul, I actually think that the Angels are solid, although with the second overall pick, they could have gone a ton more. Moving on now, while it may be unfair for the Yankees and Mets, who saw their first round picks drop 10 spots after exceeding the competitive balance threshold, they simply have a step down in overall value compared to any other team around them, and therefore end up as losers on this list. Both teams not only had basically no first round pick after picking in the 40s, but also lost their second round pick as well in the offseason. And this lack of any premium draft capital not only hurts them in terms of the number of players that they can draft and the quality of said players, but also limits what they can do with the budget of the draft money they can spend. Neither team drafted any player that I am particularly excited about. Although, for the Mets, Mitch Voigt does intrigue me a little bit as an offense-first infielder, but announcing him as a two-way player is very strange. And for the Yankees, Kilby looks like an okay infield prospect, but doesn't have any particular standout tool that provides immediate high upside. So as for now, with the day one selections, the New York teams are just a tier below everyone else in terms of overall draft haul, although this is in no part due to poor draft evaluations, as they were handicapped from the very beginning. And the last team that I want to talk about in this draft as having some pretty big questions are the Chicago Cubs, and it starts with selecting Ethan Conrad 17th overall. In terms of collegiate bats, this was probably not the best way the draft could have turned out for the Cubs, as they missed out on a lot of the top tier ones. However, that being said, I thought that there were a couple of guys that they could have drafted over Conrad with more standout tools. Personally, I would have gone with either Ike Irish, Jace Lavalette, or even Vahiva Alloy here if the plan wasn't to draft an outfielder. But I think that Conrad, while an overall solid selection, doesn't have the same high upside as many other picks after do. The other couple of picks were a bit puzzling as well. Kane Kepley is a center fielder who will long-term be handicapped at his ceiling due to having no power output, and is long-term blocked by PCA at that position in center field as well. And Dominic Reed needs heavy development on his breaking pitches in order to become a major league viable starter. Even with the middle round pick, I feel like the Cubs could have gotten so much more value for what they ended up with, and these questions will linger around this Cubs draft until proven otherwise for me at least. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, if you enjoyed, please like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below new video ideas. If you would like me to see me make an overall draft grades video once the draft is over, let me know in the comments down below. Or let me know if you would like any other videos either on the draft, next year's draft, or the trade deadline. Let me know and I will maybe make them. And without further ado, I will see you guys all in the next one. God bless.